The morning light at Westfield Joint Training Base broke clean over the southern hangars, catching the rows of blue uniformed cadets as they crossed the concrete in formation. Their flight suits were crisp and pressed, name tags straight, collars, high boots polished to mirror black. They moved with the kind of energy that expected attention, each one wearing their assignment like a badge of pride. At the edge of the runway, beneath a shadow that didn't belong to any aircraft, walked a woman who did not match them. Riley wore a slightly faded olive-drab flight suit, the fabric soft at the seams, the cuffs sun-creased. Her gloves hung from a loop at her belt, neatly knotted. Her long blonde hair was pulled back, cleanly not tight, but controlled. She carried a clipboard tucked under one arm, and though her eyes were steady, she did not move like someone being watched. She moved like someone who already knew she would be ignored. At the door to the ready bay, she paused. A whiteboard stood beside the threshold. The simulator roster was listed in clear block handwriting, 3 columns, 4 rotations. Her name was not there. Inside, the morning briefing was already underway. The front row was filled with instructors in gleaming blue flight jackets, each one marked with embroidered wings or squadron badges. Behind them, cadets leaned over tablet screens, whispering about angles of attack, stall recovery, fuel tolerances. The walls were lined with high-resolution aerials, a large LED map showing current training vectors, and 3 clocks ticking in unison. Riley stepped in without a word, slid into a folding chair near the back, and opened her checklist. She read, at once. Slowly, no one nodded to her. No one acknowledged her seat. An instructor walked past and dropped a comment under his breath, loud enough to be heard but vague enough to be defensible. Overflow in the back, at least the coffee will be hot. A couple of cadets near the aisles smirked, one of them tilted his head toward Riley and whispered something that ended in a quiet laugh. She didn't look up. She adjusted the angle of her pen and flipped to the next page. When the briefing ended, the room broke into clatter and motion. Cadets gathered their gear, bantering as they filed out toward the simulator bay. Someone bumped her chair without apology. A tall man with a pilot's patch grinned over his shoulder and said, "Watch your 6, clipboard." As he passed, Riley stood slowly, folded her seat, and walked the opposite direction. The dojo shared a wall with the auxiliary gym, marked only by a painted stripe on the floor and the faint sound of ventilation ducts humming in rhythm. The walls were lined with foam mats in pale yellow. A row of blue gaze hung from a rack by the door, sleeves swaying in the filtered sunlight. A digital sign near the entry cycled through reminders for the end-of-week evaluation. One item had just been added. Jiu-Jitsu, ground assessment. Friday, 1500 hours, pair drills, observation required. The room was nearly empty when Riley entered. She nodded at the assistant tech behind the desk and moved to the stack of clean towels. She picked up one and folded it cleanly down the center, then across, making a square. Her movements were precise but unhurried. From the far end, a small group of cadets laughed as they untied their belts and adjusted their uniforms. The tallest among them, broad across the shoulders and loud in tone, pointed toward her. "She probably thinks a triangle choke is a math problem." Another added, "They should let her demonstrate what not to do. She's got the clipboard already." Riley folded another towel. She placed it on the bench, squared the edge, and stepped aside. Her face did not change. A few minutes later, the jiu-jitsu instructor entered the room. He wore a sharp blue GI with no patches and a brown belt tied clean across his waist. His expression was relaxed, the confidence practiced. As he walked toward the center, he called out with a half smile, "We'll need someone to help warm up the line drills. How about clipboard girl? You can step in for the demo reps." The laughter this time wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was thin and practiced, the kind that knew its place in the hierarchy. Riley walked to the edge of the mat and bowed once, then moved to the side where spare knee pads were stacked. She didn't speak. The instructor began the drills with exaggerated clarity, each movement a little larger than it needed to be. He paired the cadets in twos and sent them off to practice. No one asked Riley to join. One trainee motioned to her and said, "Just keep folding towels. You've got good angles." She folded another without responding. By mid-afternoon, the group had broken for water. The room buzzed with light conversation, all of it tight-knit and exclusionary. One cadet in a blue GI walked past Riley and said with mock seriousness, "If you need help tying your belt Friday, just say so." She nodded once, whether in thanks or acknowledgement wasn't clear. He didn't wait for a reply. The instructor made one final note on the roster board, then turned to the group. "Friday's evil will be open mat, pressure rounds. You'll be paired at random. Demonstrations first. Don't worry, no one's getting hurt. Even our observers are welcome." He looked directly at Riley as he said it, smiling with just enough irony to draw more quiet laughs. She bowed slightly and returned to her seat by the wall, as the others left tossing towels, adjusting their sleeves, checking their hair in the mirror by the exit. Riley remained. The dojo cleared. The sunlight shifted across the floor. She picked up the final towel and folded it, pressing along. The crease. Outside, the hallway echoed with footsteps and casual conversation. No one waited for her, no one called her name. Her gloves still hung from her belt, untouched. Her clipboard sat beside her, folded shut. She stood alone by the mat. Long blonde hair lit faintly by the late-day sun filtering through the glacier. Quiet presence in a place that had already decided what she wasn't. But she stayed, and she watched. Riley's apartment sat at the edge of town, above a quiet hardware store that closed by 6 and rarely turned on its sign. The windows faced west, where the sun filtered in through thin blinds and spilled across the hardwood in clean, quiet streaks. The walls were bare except for one small frame near the floor, hung lower than expected, as if it were meant to be, seen only from the mat beside it. The room held little else. A low cot pressed tight to one wall, a folded blanket, one small wooden shelf with a tea kettle, 2 cups, and 3 books lined precisely along the edge. On the floor near the window was a square of matting, softened by years of use, its corners curling slightly where the stitching had worn. Riley stood barefoot beside it, wrapping tape around the joints of her fingers. Her white GI lay folded. On a clean towel nearby, the fabric soft and slightly faded at the collar. She unrolled it with care, lining up the seams before slipping her arms through the sleeves. Her brown belt sat beside it, coiled once and tied off. She tightened it slowly, feeling the familiar weight settle at her waist, then stepped onto the mat. She moved without warm-up, no mirror, no music, just a low breath in her chest and the sound of the floor beneath her feet. Her steps were exact, deliberate, shrimping, shoulder rolls, hip escapes. Her body remembered without needing instruction. When she dropped into a seated guard, her hand brushed the corner of the mat and paused. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the frame on the wall. In the photo, she was 17. Her hair had been shorter then, tied up high. She wore a brand new GI, still stiff from the package, and stood beside a small stone-faced man with his hands folded behind his back. His name had been Shihan Matsuda. The dojo in Okinawa had no website, no social media, no belt tests for show. He had taken her in after a visiting tournament, after watching her spar without ceremony, without showmanship. She'd stayed with him through 5 summers. She never missed a morning. Beneath the photo, a strip of paper had been glued to the frame with careful script and dark ink. It read, "Control is not what you feel, it is what others lose." She lowered herself into mount, shifted to side control, then into a smooth north-south transition. Her hands moved with practiced angles, always precise, never rushed. There was no performance, no audience, just the clean logic of movement, repeated for its own sake. After 20 minutes, she stood and bowed once to the edge of the mat. She untied her belt, coiled it again, and laid the GI flat across the towel. Every fold landed perfectly. She wiped her hands once on her pants, then walked into the small kitchen and filled the kettle. The water boiled slowly, the heat rising in quiet wisps against the dim light. She poured it into a chipped white mug and drank without sugar. Her hands rested against the counter as she stood there, watching the steam rise, her breath even and unfazed. The weight of the afternoon hadn't followed her. The snide comments, the looks, the clipped laughs, they were not stored here. She had no shelf for them. By Wednesday, the flight rotation board was filled, end to end. Cadet names were marked in blue, matched 2 time slots for high-altitude testing and air-to-ground coordination drills. Riley scanned the board the same way she had every morning, quietly, slowly, methodically, and found nothing next to her name. A dry erase line ran straight through the margin where her slot should have been. She didn't erase it. She didn't mention it. She just turned and walked down the hall toward the auxiliary gym, her gloves still looped at her side. The base dojo was louder than usual that morning. A new instructor had arrived the day before, flown in for a short-term evaluation cycle. His name was Joel Redmond. He moved through the room like he had been born for the role. Tall, square-shouldered, his voice loud and confident. His blue GI was pressed so sharp, it caught light like a uniform jacket. His brown belt was tied with perfect symmetry, knotted with a practiced tug that left no slack. He wore the belt like a credential. As the cadets gathered, he walked the length of the mat and clapped once to signal attention. "Open mat drills today," he said. "We're running short reps, 2-minute exchanges. Keep it light, unless I say otherwise." His eyes scanned the group. Then he pointed toward Riley, who stood near the edge of the mat with her arms folded behind her back. "You clipboard from Monday. You've got good posture. Let's use you for balance work." A few cadets turned toward her, one of them, the same who had made the triangle choke joke earlier in the week, gave a low whistle and tapped the shoulder of the guy next to him. Phones were already in hands, raised just enough to catch angles without being too obvious. Riley stepped forward without a word. She bowed at the edge of the mat and walked to the center. Her white GI was clean and unadorned, her belt tied with precision, the fabric worn soft at the tips. Redmond smiled as she approached. "We're going to demo a simple throw and reset," he said. "Nothing dramatic, just flow." The room grew still, enough to catch the whisper of movement from the fabric of their uniforms. Redmond stepped in, hooked her leg, and executed a smooth takedown. Riley hit the mat with control, tucked her chin, and reset. He did it again. This time, the fall was a bit harder, not unsafe, not wrong, but harder. She rose steady. Her expression didn't change. The third throw was faster, designed more to show than to teach. Phones flicked up again. Someone near the bench muttered, "That's going in the chat. Frame 2 is gold." Riley stood. She bowed. Redmond turned away to speak to the group. "See? That control, that's how you keep things clean. Partner with someone your size and rep it. Go." Pairs scattered across the mat. Riley stepped toward the bench, but before she reached it, one of the cadets tossed a towel across the floor in her direction. She caught it mid-air and folded it automatically, the habit too deep to break. He grinned as he passed. "Nice catch. You sure you're not here on laundry duty?" No one corrected him. The noise in the room rose as pairs started to grapple. Redmond moved among them, offering loud encouragement to some, correcting others with theatrical claps or quick hand gestures. He passed Riley without looking at her. 10 minutes into the session, Redmond called out, "Switch partners. Let's mix the weight classes a little." Riley was left unpaired as others reorganized. She waited. When the rotation landed, she found herself opposite a cadet who had rolled his sleeves halfway up and wore a smirk before the drill even started. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll keep it slow for you." The moment the rep began, he drove forward hard and swept her leg with more force than the movement called for. Riley fell, hit the mat clean, and rolled out. She stood. No complaint, no adjustment. They reset. He did it again. The second takedown was followed by a loud clap on his own shoulder, mimicking Redmond's coaching voice. "See that control?" Another cadet snorted. Someone near the back turned a phone screen toward a friend and mouthed, "Watch this." Redmond called for a reset. Riley stepped aside. Her belt had not shifted. Her sleeves were still even. At the end of the session, the instructor clapped his hands together and waved toward the whiteboard. The group gathered around, sweat still beading on their faces, panting slightly. The smell of effort filled the room. "We're locking Friday's schedule," Redmond said, uncapping a marker. "Everyone's getting mat time. Evaluation's going to be live flow. No submissions unless called. I'll pick pairings. And yes," he added, with a glance toward Riley, "we're opening with a demo round." He wrote her name on the board with quick looping letters, her first name only, no title, no rank. Just Riley, written between brackets and underlined once. "Soft start," he said, smiling as he capped the pen. "Then we'll get into the real matchups." The late afternoon sun turned the high windows gold. The light filtered down across the dojo in long, quiet beams, catching on the yellow mat and bouncing soft reflections against the off-white walls. Heat clung to the floor, the kind of warmth that settled low and slow. Shoes lined the wall in perfect pairs. The smell of sweat and pine cleaner hung faintly in the air. Cadets in blue GIs crowded the edges of the room, lining up along the benches and leaning against the walls. Their belts all brown were tied tight, sleeves rolled or pressed flat, depending on who was trying to look more casual or more prepared. Several held phones, already angled low but ready. Others whispered near the door, laughing into the crooks of their arms. One of them glanced toward the center of the mat, then nodded. "She's going to get tossed. Betting makes it look clean." Another responded with a grin. "3 throws, maybe 4. Then he'll bow her out and call the real match." Across the room, Riley stood barefoot near the wall, her hands at her sides. Her white GI looked like it had been ironed by hand. The collar sat smooth against her neck, the sleeves falling evenly past her wrists. Her brown belt was tied flat, ends aligned, no fray visible from this distance. Her long blonde hair was pulled into a tight knot at the base of her neck. She had said nothing all day. Joel Redmond clapped once and stepped onto the mat, the floor squeaking under his heel. His blue GI was bright under the overhead lights, his belt double-looped and stiff. He turned to the crowd and lifted one hand. "We'll start with a light flow, just to loosen things up. A little warm-up, then we'll pair up and go live." He turned his head, motioned toward Riley without even saying her name. "Come on up, help me walk them through it." She stepped forward without hesitation. Her footfalls were soft but steady. Her back straight, her face unreadable. She bowed at the edge of the mat, then walked to meet him in the center. Redmond didn't return the bow. He just smiled, turned to the group, and began, "Basic entry. Watch the posture. It's about motion, not force." He stepped in and caught her lapel, spinning clean into a shoulder throw. She rolled smoothly and landed without a sound. The mat caught the impact with a low thud. Phones rose. Someone near the front chuckled. "Clean, that's one." Riley stood. She bowed again. "Reset. Flow drill," Redmond announced, pacing backward. "In a circle, hook sweep, hip post. Watch the rotation." He lunged forward, caught her foot with his own, and pulled her down fast and wide. It looked like a seminar move, something meant to draw applause. She hit the mat, recovered, and stood again. Redmond looked out over the group. "She's flexible, makes it easy." The third throw came with a little flourish. He twisted at the last moment to turn it into a trip, letting his own momentum amplify the fall. Riley didn't resist. She followed the movement down, rolled through it, and reset in one fluid motion. 3. Someone whispered near the wall, called it. More laughter, quieter this time. Phones still recorded. Riley stood again, bowed again. She adjusted nothing. Redmond wiped his brow with the edge of his sleeve. "Let's finish strong," he said. "One more sequence, then we'll get serious." He clapped once more, then squared his feet. "This one's a full flow chain. Takedown to mount to control. Nothing heavy." She nodded, once not differential, just acknowledgement. The dojo went quiet in that way rooms do just before something unexpected. No signal, no cue, but the tone had shifted. The instructor didn't notice. Redmond stepped in again, faster this time. He went for a collar grip with his left hand, trying to guide her into the same trip he'd used earlier. She let the lapel slide. Her right foot pivoted just enough to change. The angle he pulled, she didn't fall. He regripped, tried to circle. She moved with him, not against, her posture floating but firm. No resistance, but no compliance either. Redmond turned, looking for the hook again. Her feet adjusted. The pressure disappeared under him like slackline. Someone near the door lowered their phone. The noise hadn't changed. The light hadn't changed, but Riley was no longer participating. She was present. The instructor reset his weight and shifted into a controlled throw setup. His elbow moved, guiding the collar. Her shoulder dipped. The movement should have completed. Instead, her foot slid behind his lead leg, barely touching it. Her hips turned. He was off balance before he noticed. The mat didn't catch them yet. It only waited. Riley's hand landed lightly on his back. She didn't push, she placed. The group around the edge of the room watched in a new kind of silence. Not focus, not all confusion. Something was different, but no one had the language for it yet. Redmond stepped again. She flowed with him. The cadence of the match had changed, and he was no longer conducting it. Someone whispered, "Wait, is this still the demo?" Another answered without turning, "He hasn't called the stop." The instructor tried to re-engage. He shifted to a simple re-entry, aiming to catch her lapel and sweep again. Her hand reached beneath his arm knot, grabbing, not fighting, just guiding. His elbow lifted, her body turned, and then, without any visible signal, she slipped past him, her back low. Her knees touching down behind his hips. She didn't finish it. Not yet. Redmond stepped away, adjusting his belt, forcing a small laugh. "Okay, let's reset one more time," but no one moved. Riley stood where she was, posture clean, hands at her sides. She hadn't thrown him, she hadn't submitted him. She hadn't even raised her voice. But the room knew. The phones were still in hands, but no one was recording now. The light caught her white GI as she stepped backward, toward the edge of the mat. Her bow was slow. The crease of her belt hadn't shifted. Her hair hadn't moved. She waited for the next command. Redmond stood at the center, one hand on his hip, trying to look relaxed. He looked over the room and smiled. "All right," he said. "Pair up. Let's start the first round." But his voice landed softer than before, and no one laughed this time. Redmond shifted his stance, eyes locked on Riley, and raised his hand again. The warm light still poured through the high windows, painting the mat in gold. Dust floated quietly. In the beam behind her, soft and slow, like nothing urgent was happening here. But tension had settled into the room like humidity before a storm. "All right," he said, louder than necessary. "Let's reset and finish clean." His voice carried weight, but it didn't move anyone. A few cadets near the bench exchanged glances. Someone lowered their phone into their lap. No one laughed, no one said a word. Riley stepped forward. She didn't adjust her belt or brush her sleeves. Her white GI looked untouched, even after the earlier rounds. Her posture didn't change as she bowed once more and met him at the center. Redmond gave a sharp nod, most a flinch, then he moved. He went for the same opening he had used before, lapel grip high, lead foot inside. It was the setup he knew best, one that worked well in demonstration, fast enough to impress but safe enough to control. His grip found the collar. Her hand met his wrist. Then she pivoted. Her hip turned not sharply, but with precision. She didn't pull or twist. She didn't resist. She flowed. Redmond expected the weight to shift back. Instead, it slipped under him. He stumbled forward half a step, and in that breath of imbalance, she moved behind him, her right arm framed against his waist, her left hooked his far leg. She stepped, dropped her weight, and he was no longer upright. The mat caught him hard, his body sprawled, one knee bent awkwardly, the other sliding wide to regain base. Before he could reset, she was already climbing. Riley's right foot posted. Her left knee slid behind his shoulder. She didn't rush. She didn't look at the room. Her left arm laced under his chin, not tight, not forced, just present. He turned sharply, trying to twist out. She let him roll. That was the mistake. As he turned, she floated with him. Her chest pressed against his back, her legs circling, hooks in. His breath caught. The room had gone silent. No shifting shoes, no screens tapping, just the low hum of the building and the sharp inhale of someone near the back wall. Riley's arm slid across his jaw. Not locking yet, just waiting. Her legs adjusted behind his knees. Her pressure was exact, not heavy, not light, just true. Redmond jerked forward, trying to throw her off, but her hips followed. He dropped his weight backward. She absorbed it. No resistance, just alignment. She didn't finish the choke. She adjusted the angle of her elbow and tightened 1 inch, just enough to let him feel the potential. He reached up, tried to peel her hand. She let him try. He bridged, she floated. Then she shifted once, silent and final, and the grip clicked into place. The tap came sharp. 3 knuckles on the mat. 1, 2, 3. Her arm released instantly. She stepped back. Her legs untangled with clean movement. No extra pressure. She stood and bowed. Redmond stayed seated, hand on the mat, chest rising fast. Riley walked toward the edge of the mat. Her steps were even, her shoulders relaxed. She didn't look over her shoulder. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. Her white GI moved slightly in the warm draft from the vent near the back wall. Her brown belt remained tied. No fray had come loose. No dust had landed on her collar. Behind her, the instructor slowly sat up. His eyes flicked toward the benches. Most cadets had stopped pretending to hold their phones. No one clapped. No one smirked. Someone reached to turn off a recording. The air inside the dojo had shifted. Not broken, just rearranged like furniture that had always been in the wrong place. Riley stepped off the mat and bowed once more. At the edge, she slipped on her sandals and moved toward the exit. Her breath was steady. The light caught the edge of her cheek. Her hair had come slightly loose at the base, one strand falling forward as she passed through the door. No one followed. Redmond stood slowly, dusted his sleeve, and faced the room. He opened his mouth as if to speak, closed it, adjusted his belt, nodded once to no one in particular. He looked smaller now. The cadets shifted on the bench, quieter than they had ever been, not out of discipline, out of recognition. Riley had not won anything. She had not shouted, not celebrated, not claimed a single word of credit. But she had changed something, and no one could pretend otherwise. The evening light washed the hangar corridor in soft gold, fading slowly into blue as the sun dipped behind the tree line. The base was quieter than usual, not empty, but muted, the kind of stillness that followed something unspoken. Footsteps were softer, voices lowered. The heavy doors echoed more than they had the day before. Riley walked down the corridor at her usual pace, neither hurried nor slow. Her flight suit was the same olive drab. Her gloves still looped neatly through her belt. She passed a row of vending machines without stopping. They hummed the only noise besides her footsteps. At the end of the hall, she paused at the simulator board. The whiteboard had been freshly wiped. A new column had been added with updated call signs and time slots. The markers were sharp and recent. Her name was not on the list. She looked at it for a moment, her eyes scanning the grid as if double-checking. Then she stepped aside to let another cadet pass. He glanced at her, hesitated, then gave a shallow nod before continuing down the hall. He did not speak. Inside the observation room, 2 trainees sat beside a monitor, elbows resting on the desk, eyes fixed on a paused screen. The video feeds showed a moment frozen mid-motion the instant Riley had taken the back. Her white GI was a flash of light in a field of blue. The time stomp blinked in the lower corner. One cadet leaned back in his chair. "I've never seen that transition, not like that, not that clean." The other didn't answer. He hit play, watched the tap, then hit pause again. The sound was off. Farther down the hall, another screen lit up with the same footage. this one held in a cadet's hand, half hidden behind his bag. His thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. Then he deleted the file. The joke caption was never posted. Riley turned the corner into Hangar 2, where a maintenance light buzzed softly overhead. The hangar was empty except for a lone tool cart and the hollow echo of her steps. She moved to the far end and sat on the edge of a grounded test crate, its label peeled and corners rusted. She opened her notebook and drew a pencil across the margin of the last page. She did not write about the match. She didn't log the submission. She didn't record what they said or how they looked when the tap came. Instead, she flipped to the page marked fuel ratios, low altitude adjustments. Her handwriting was small and deliberate. She marked a correction near the heading that read crosswind flare compensation. Then she closed the notebook and sat still, letting the quiet surround her. Outside, the sky had shifted to a soft lavender. The hangar windows caught the last of it, framing her in shadow and light. Her posture never changed. No part of her looked restless. No celebration buzzed beneath the surface. She stood after a while and walked back to the exit, her boots tapping gently on the concrete. When she passed the simulator bay again, no one blocked her path. One cadet glanced her way, then quickly back to his notes. She left the building without a word. Her apartment was still and cool when she stepped inside. The mat by the window had not moved. The air smelled faintly of tea and old wood. She slipped off her boots and walked to the low shelf by the wall. The white GI lay folded exactly as she had left it. The brown belt was still coiled on top of it, ends aligned. Lifted both with care and placed them beside the photograph in the small frame. The image had faded slightly in the afternoon sun, a younger Riley, barefoot, bowing beside an elderly man whose eyes seemed to look through the camera. She did not stare at the photo, she knew it by heart. She placed the GI beside it, smoothing the fabric with one hand. The belt she aligned again, then stepped back. Outside, a dog barked once from the alley, then fell silent. A car passed. The world went on, just as it always had. Riley poured a cup of water from the kettle and drank it slowly. No message blinked on her phone. No call came. The silence held, but it did not feel empty. She walked to her mat, knelt, and bowed once, not for a crowd, not for applause, just for the practice, just to close the day. Then she stood and turned off the light. Behind her, the GI remained folded, the photo undisturbed, and the truth of who she was no longer lived. In secrecy, it had only been seen. Sometimes, the strongest people in the room are the ones no one notices until silence reveals what noise has always tried to cover. Riley didn't rise by force or pride. She didn't argue or prove a point. She simply stayed true to herself, even when every voice around her dismissed her presence. What they mistook for passivity was mastery in its quietest form. She didn't need a spotlight. She only needed a mat, a moment, and the truth of her training. This story isn't about winning. It's about enduring, about knowing who you are even when no one else sees it. If Riley's journey made you pause, the silence always has something to say. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.